distance we cover.
How crucial might Steve Bannon be to your investigation?
Well, it all depends on what he has seen and what he has heard. He could obviously be very significant. Certainly those comments that he made about that meeting, as well as the comments he made about concerns over money laundering in the Trump organization, are really quite front and center for us.
Part of my interview with House Intel ranking member Adam Schiff in this last hour on what he'd like to find out from Steve Bannon during the course of the Russia investigation. Well, the former White House chief strategist is reportedly set to interview with the House Intel Committee on Tuesday. Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Denny Heck of Washington. He is also a member of the House Intel Committee. Congressman, it's always good to talk with you, and I'm not going to have you confirm that your committee is meeting with Steve Bannon, because I know you won't.
Alex, I finally trained you.
Yeah, okay, but I still alluded to it. Anyway, but hearing what Congressman Schiff said there, is that how you see it?
So I'm going to do my Howard Baker imitation with Steve Bannon, as with everybody else. I want to know, what did you know and when did you know it? And obviously, as somebody who played an integral role at the very heart and in the heartbeat of the White House, he very well may have something to offer that is of value if he, in fact, is being interviewed by the House Select Committee on Intelligence.
So given the fallout over the book Fire and Fury, do you expect Steve Bannon would be forthcoming or combative? Since he's no longer in the president's good graces, he certainly made an overture to try and become so, but it appears that that's like not accepted. Persona non grata, he seems to be.
Well, Alex, I see Mr. Bannon as somebody who may or may not be forthcoming, but he is always combative. Look, I'm not going to be a hypocrite about this and stand on the sidelines and rub my hands in partisan glee that the Republican Party has fallen into this great battle between Mr. Bannon and the forces of Bannon and some of the rest of them. The fact of the matter is that within a month or two of his actually being installed in the White House, I wrote the president a letter and said, by virtue of temperament and character and public policy positions, this person is not fit to be in the White House, and please get rid of him. So I'm glad he's left the White House, and frankly, I'm glad he's being marginalized within Republican Party politics, because I think his point of view has no place in American politics.
So after Democratic and California Senator Feinstein released the transcript of the Judiciary Committee's interview with Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson, the president was tweeting. Here's what he said: Russia and the world is laughing at the stupidity they are witnessing. Republicans should finally take control. So what do you think he meant by that, considering how partisan this investigation has been from the start?
Well, it's becoming more partisan than it was. In fact, I'm increasingly concerned about our ability actually to fulfill our job and get at the truth behind this in terms of our committee deliberations. I'm very bothered by the fact that, as Adam Schiff has reported and indicated, Republicans are being highly resistant to subpoenas to Deutsche Bank in our effort to get at some of the potential money laundering efforts that may have occurred between the Trump family and that bank and others associated with Russia. I'm very disturbed that they're resisting efforts to get at a subpoena for Twitter to see what some of the communications may have been between campaign operatives and WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. The fact of the matter is that they're not being terribly helpful right now. At the end of the day, however, Alex, as I have said repeatedly, in Bob Mueller I trust. There is an entity underway with considerable resources behind them, whose integrity is unquestioned, that will seek to serve the national interest. In fact, on the House side, on the congressional side, I do hope that we get to the point of dealing with one of the terms of reference of our investigation that has kind of gotten short shrift throughout the last year, and that is, what is it that we do to arm ourselves against this happening again? I've said to you repeatedly, Alex, the Russians did this. They did it on a scale unlike they had ever done before. They're doing it elsewhere, and they're going to continue to do it. Well, in fact, we've now had an indication that they're playing in the Mexico national election. So we need to begin devising some of the mechanisms that will deter them and prevent them from doing this to us again, especially now that we're into the year of the midterm elections.
Yeah. I look at where you are, though, right now. You're in Seattle. They're on the West Coast. Given what happened yesterday in Hawaii, all the sheer panic over the false alarm, the New York Times is suggesting a link between President Trump's rhetoric on North Korea, that the legitimate panic on the islands was heightened by the president's rhetoric about North Korea. Is this the climate Hawaiians are living in right now?
So not just the Hawaiians, those of us who live on the West Coast, Alex. So those of us of a certain age find this eerily reminiscent of when we conducted the drills at Lakeshore Elementary School in Vancouver, Washington, of diving under the desk in preparation for a nuclear attack back in the early 1960s. The fact of the matter is, when human errors occur, and nations don't communicate, and nations engage in miscalculations, that's when war could occur. I am deeply, deeply sorry for the panic that the people of Hawaii felt yesterday, but I am also just as deeply concerned about the fact that we are in a context and a climate in which human error can lead to miscalculation, could lead to the unthinkable.
All right, Congressman Denny Heck, it's always good to speak with you. I'll look forward to doing it again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.